met. If you're new to my vlogs, this series is meant to affirm parts of our past that aid us toward greater purpose, and to define what's wrong with the world in our struggles. With light and dark and rational perspective, we motivate our dreams. I've sadly reached a point where I need to openly film myself to thwart this practice. If more would express personal depth, we may inspire better discussion for social change. I started posting to be larger than life. I want a reputation in combat sports to humiliate cultural greed, alienation, and loneliness. All that happened, all that I stand for will be a strength to prove in the arena. I call this practice marshalling. I reflect on past struggle and virtue enough to make a confident public story and promise. You don't need to tell anyone to feel its strength. I just take it further. I'll begin my story as an example, and you may draw parallels that inspire feeling. I was born in Seattle, a port city known for antisocial atmosphere. They call it Seattle Freeze. As I would find out, the social prospect of growing up here would be a serious joke, one that tests the limits of poor children. I had one parent, and we were low caste in terms of wealth. Still, I was a happy and expressive child, like a mascot. My mom tells me a story of how I told someone on the bus to stop smoking. I told them if they didn't stop, they'd turn into a skeleton. They put out their cigarettes smiling. That was the first time I felt proud of something I didn't remember. Ever since, it was something I wanted to live up to. It was once I began school that things changed for the worst. My very first memory of kindergarten was my head shoved into a toilet. I didn't comprehend violence yet. All I knew was I had to avoid the bathroom. Sometimes I'd be allowed the nurse's bathroom, but it wasn't enough. I'd wet myself, not knowing social consequence. It set tone for everything. I was an instant outcast, not knowing why I had to be so different. Violence just finds you, and you'll be seen the monster for it. I just wanted to fit in, hoping for answers. The offender was black, and I was then told advice that inspired my first racism. My identity was frantic. Feeling embarrassed, pissing myself didn't last long, but I was already led to hate. I felt the world split into good and evil, but worse, I began feeling inferior to whites. I found a group of friends who always hung out. In time, I grew to be excluded and unrelatable. I remember crying about it. That was when I decided to take it out on one. I threw a rock at him, cursing his Muslim background. I felt my first regret and disgust soon after. It was enough to drop my hate for dark skin. Still, I hardly knew a break. A gang of young girls came by one day and vandalized a car. They didn't bother leaving. I happened by when the owner showed up. Immediately, the girls pointed at me, barely containing their laughter. I was held physically hostage till I saw my mom come home. I learned quick that order in the world was an illusion. Around second grade, this kid threw food at me during lunch. I threw it back as the principal walked in. When he asked whose fault, dozens of kids pointed down the whole row at me, except two girls sitting next. Those two tried defending me. I took punishment in his office, loathing humanity. I already hated school enough to plan smashing its windows. Luckily, I didn't forget the two girls. I grew so angry, yet so perpetually ashamed. I never felt part of anything. I tried to hide my anger, but abused my pet hamsters if they upset me. The shock only came once they died, once I saw what death was. I still know I deserve death for it, but I just can't. My anger made me brave. When my mom was robbed in broad daylight by gangsters, I went to the slum to search and destroy the bastards. Lucky for me, I didn't find them. There were times that moved me as a kid. One night, I walked alone crying when an orange stray cat appeared, meowing at my side to comfort me. Somehow, I just knew he was the kitten I petted years before, and we were a distance from where we first met. Nothing was more surreal. I'd do anything to bring back a stray cat lost to time. There were two girls that left an impression. One pretended I was some prince to flatter me. Thanks to her, I forever try to be one. The other was pretty much looking for a boyfriend, but still. All the giggling and excitement crouched behind some bush showed me that I exist. I agreed when asked if I'd shop with her and her grandma. That first rush was unreal. In the moment, I forgot I was some phoneless 9-year-old stranger tagging along for a faraway visit. Once I saw the promise was beyond me, I felt bad enough to never break another. I felt I broke something sacred. By middle school, darkness kept on. The atmosphere had a sudden disturbing lack of community. I sensed a hair-raising narcissism. The most memorable time in class had to be when we were asked to draw a goal. I drew my aspiration to be an architect, illustrating a 3D utopian skyline with a monorail. I can't believe how beautiful it was, but when we finished, the teacher moved on like the activity was nothing. That was a symbolic death of creativity for me. In that moment of upset, I crumpled my paper and threw it away. It's one of my biggest regrets. By now, I'd been to counseling referral since grade school. No matter what happened next, school just expected me to be an adult. I still hung out with the same friends when one day, some older boys marched us into an empty house, pointing BB guns. They told us to do lewd things, but I refused and was let off the hook. I was still an idiot, compliciting and almost getting blown by one of the guys. Good thing we weren't committed to the act, and everyone had a laugh. Being an attention-starved kid, I didn't know what to feel in that incident. I went home, being the one to sobbingly report what happened to my mom. She reported to the authorities, and the incident blew up into a court case I attended. I never wanted it to be that. I just wanted someone to cry to. I saw the trauma on the older boy's face after, and I became untouchable. Everyone kept away from me, and it spread to half the school. Beside rumors, I started feeling so worthless that I'd just act out between class, before skipping school altogether. If I showed up to class, teachers and staff degraded me with sarcasm. My grades went all 0, and I started feeling I was stupid. I started to see how everything was an empty competition for grades. Those were my first suicidal thoughts at 11. I took a fork to a socket, but didn't commit. School gave me no purpose, so I found my own. It was my love for history, art, science fiction, and video games. You had to hand it to video games for piquing my interest in history and music since grade school. The need to stay home to study history and science online was stronger than anything. Just as much, I wanted to study why humanity was so awful, and so I began. This is the end of part 1. I'll cover my awakening in part 2. See you soon.